So, next question from our beautiful audience. Why do men think drinking will solve their problems?
Eddie, this sounds like a you question.
Oh, brutal.
Yeah. Oh,
That sounds like your problem. No.
oh. I can't really talk on that specific question because it wasn't about drinking. For me was about escaping my own mind. So I used alcohol because I got sick of sitting there depressed, over analysing and not sleeping at nights and just thinking about how poorly my life was going. So I think with the painkiller addiction I had, and then on top you put the liquor, and then you combine the two, and it gives you a different effect, and it actually switches the brain off. So you just stop feeling, momentarily you stop self-loathing, and
So not really anything at all to do with solving your problems so much as escaping them.
yeah, pretty
It
much.
sounds to me like what I use writing lyrics to do. It sounds like an unhealthy way of
It's
venting.
an unhealthy way.
It sounds
yeah.
like what somebody would do
It
if they
leads
didn't
to
have a
further
way.
depression because it doesn't help.
Well, it causes problems too. That's why I stopped drinking for a long time,
Yeah.
because I ended up behind bars multiple
Yeah,
times.
exactly. You start
and
doing stupid
beefing with gangs and breaking my hands and
stuff. You lose control.
yep.
It doesn't lead to a good place.
My teenage years
It can
drinking.
lead to gambling. It can lead to all the bad things in life.
Yeah, my teenage years of drinking could have led to a very dark place in my life. Like if I carried on the path that I was going at the age of 18 and 19,
Yeah.
and I carried on going to town and picking fights and,
Exactly.
getting in this punch up and getting in that one or jumping in this
Easily turn
situation.
into a manslaughter.
What is hands down
One
our
fight. That's it.
number one drug problem in New Zealand is alcohol. Hands down.
Oh, definitely.
More domestic violence,
Yeah.
more injuries,
Yeah.
more harm done with alcohol than any other drug. And yet you can
Destroys the homes.
you can buy it at a Foursquare or a supermarket, or you know what I mean? Like
It's terrible
kind of
how that's a part of our culture.
yeah. But I mean, it's ingrained in the New Zealand culture, right? If you stop and pause and think for a moment, a baby's born, we have a few beers to celebrate. They turn 21. What do? They get married. What do? They have a kid. What do? They die. What do? So like every point of celebration in New Zealand, it's a real beer culture.
Yeah, and if you don't celebrate by having a beer, well, then
Yeah.
everyone's asking you, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you man enough to have a, why aren't
Yeah.
you being a man and drinking a
Yeah,
beer?
yeah.
You know what I mean? So it
Yeah,
almost
stuff.
becomes such a stereotypical
stigma.
thing that if you don't participate,
Yes.
well, then they're probably going to be pointing you out and making you feel like the odd one out,
Yeah.
and like you should be participating, or else XYZ.
There's something wrong with you.
You
You're
get
somehow lesser.
ostracised, don't you?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So stigma, I think that's
So, yeah.
and we're about breaking the stigma.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
so,
definitely about breaking
I
stigmas.
think that's definitely a very good conversation. So I had to learn when I stepped away from drinking. So I do it occasionally. I still do it to this
Yeah,
day. I stopped drinking for about 2 years. I only had my first drink at my dad's 50th in January. But before that, I stopped drinking for about 2 years. I can step away from drinking, and that's something that I try to make sure I can always do. So if at any point, if I go touring, so touring is where it becomes a problem, because, back when I was touring and there was that period of touring when I was single, that's like the New Zealand version of sex, drugs and rock and roll. You're really living an artist's lifestyle. It might not be as spectacular as, they have it in the States, but you're doing it homegrown backyard version in New Zealand. And it does become a problem of drinking. You're doing a show. For example, you do a show, you're getting provided alcohol on your riders. So as an artist, I'm going to do shows, and I'm doing Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and every one of these shows, I'm getting provided every piece of alcohol that I asked for.
Yeah.
It causes a problem. As an artist, I'm embarrassed to say that I did a show in Levin at the Roadhouse. I was so drunk, I ended up pretty much with barely any clothes on. Didn't remember the show the next day. Somebody showed me a photo of my bro Ricky, who comes up on stage with me. And I was like, oh, that's a cool photo. Did you take that? And he goes, bro, I'm on stage with you. How did I take that? I was like, who had my phone then? Like, I have no idea who took this photo, how they
Yep.
got my phone, but I was
Yep.
just written off, and I shouldn't have been in that state on stage. But as an artist, you get engulfed into that drinking culture that comes with performing or entertainment or anything in this country, like you just said. But
Yeah.
the problem is, it's not just New Zealand; it's actually worldwide. You know what I mean?
Nah, not all countries have.
Well,
issues.
for if
In the West.
if you look at the
Yes,
majority
in
of
the
the
West.
standard countries, or we look at New Zealand, Australia, America, whatever, the drinking culture is a thing.
Yeah, but you look at something like Germany,
Yeah.
where they treat it like a food, and so young children are having a beer with their meal, with their parents. That's a normal part of their culture.
Yeah.
But they don't have the same problems with drink driving. They don't have the same problems with alcohol abuse. It's that whole
France is another one.
yeah.
Spain's another.
Yeah, so it's an interesting twist in our country, like what goes on that front. I had a moment a couple of weeks back where I'm like, I'm a bourbon drinker. I like a few sort of American things, low and slow barbecue, smoking stuff, and I like bourbons, and I've got quite a collection of them, and I like to have a bourbon after work, and I sort of like, heck, I've had a bourbon every night for probably 10 nights in a row, and I sort of had to stop and go, is this a problem? Am I just enjoying a bourbon, or is it I can't enjoy my evening without having a bourbon?
Becomes
Like
a habit.
I just started to think, like I just sort of had to stop and go, it's like, is this a thing? Yeah.
So that's good that you
That's-
identified
yeah, I was
that.
going to say that.
So
that
that's
you can catch yourself.
yeah. So that's
Yeah.
like when I go back to the painkiller thing that I bring up, right? This is a big thing for me because that recognizing what I went through and what I was going through during that whole situation is what kind of planted the seed for me to start this whole podcast and start these conversations. So that's why I'll probably tie back to that quite a lot throughout the podcast. But I was injured. I ruptured my pec February 2020. And then I was taking tramadols, taking whatever, because I had to. I was in a lot of pain. I was having bloody post-traumatic, like waking up in the night having nightmares. This shit was so painful that it actually scarred me mentally. And I was taking painkillers because I had to get to sleep. Otherwise, I'm tossing and turning and it was too sore. But it wasn't until I sit there and think back and I look back at the whole situation. I was still taking painkillers August 3rd when my boy was born, and that's 6 months onwards.
Yeah.
But that entire 6 months, I didn't identify. I didn't look at that and be like, hold on, there's a problem here. It just became normal. And as it became normal, I had to take more and more for it to be anything. But it wasn't until that situation. And then after I identified, I was like, I took 3 tramadols at 12 o'clock at night. Then he
That's
was,
a lot of
he
tramadols.
went into, Aruhali went into labour at 3 o'clock in the morning. So 3 hours afterwards.
Yeah.
And so I had to function
Yeah.
and get my son, delivered and be present for that situation. For 6 weeks premature he came, so I wasn't expecting it. But when I look back at that, and I didn't sleep for 3 days after saying I'm not going to use that anymore, because I was using them to go to sleep because it just became normal. And then, it's only recently that I kind of look back at that entire situation. I'm like, okay, so I started off by taking a couple tramadols or one tramadol, and then it became a couple, then it became a few, and then it became every night, and then it became for 6 months. And then when I couldn't take them, I was staying up for 3 days straight. And now I identify that as, well, that's what addiction is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's addiction.
That's addiction, but I didn't realize at the time. So that's why I say, it's really cool that you can go 10 days in.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what this is. This is what I probably need to do. This is what you've identified.
Yeah. Should I maybe have a water every night before bed rather than a bourbon?
I think
Yeah.
Nathan's developed a lot of tools. Because you catch yourself, you would have developed these tools and these.
Yeah, I think while I'm an
Or have you always been able to catch yourself on stuff like that?
Yeah, so I think while I'm extroverted, I'm also very introspective in that I think about how I'm behaving. I think about what I'm doing. I'll quite often pull apart an interaction with another person after the fact.
Do you analyse it?
Yeah, and like how did I treat them, and or like how did they make me feel, or how did I make them feel, that kind of stuff. And I like sort of think about it. So I'm very good at sort of like almost self-evaluating, how I am with people and stuff. So I'm like, I apply that to other things as well. And like, I'm definitely my own worst critic when it comes to my creative work, with filmmaking and stuff. It's that whole, it's never quite finished, right? You release stuff and then you look at it later and you're like, oh man, I wish I'd.
Would you
There's like 10
consider
things on
yourself
the
a
list.
perfectionist?
Little bit, almost like a little bit of,
OCD?
a little bit of tendencies towards that, like just that neat, orderly, process-driven, like that kind of stuff. I like.
Structure.
Do you ever
Yeah.
bite your fingernails?
No.
So have you heard that link between the two? The geniuses bite their fingernails or something like that?
Yeah, I told you that.
You did? Well, because
I told you.
I think I started biting my fingernails because I saw you do it. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty
Well,
sure
I haven't bit them in
that's
4 years.
I know, but I
You're
still
lying.
can't.
He started biting his fingernails because you told him geniuses do it. He's like, oh, 100%. I'm going to become a genius by biting my fingernails.
And that's as simple as it is.